the deep blue, a cobalt expanse of awe and wonder. Is it a marvel of our own unique world, or a dormant terror that breeds nightmares and thrives on peril? That may sound dramatic, but consider the tales of these recreational and professional mariners. Against the odds, they fought against themselves, the ferocity of Mother Nature, and the passing of time to return to solid ground. Or did they? Can you decide which of these three stories of people lost at sea are true, and which were derived from the imagination?
The line that divides the factual from the unreal has long since blurred. The tales we once thought fantastical, now implanted as true. To decipher verity from the imagined, you must break from the ordinary and consider a universe where the outlandish prevails. Can you expand your mind to see beyond our perceived reality? Can you decide what's fact or fiction?
The ocean takes up about 361 million square miles of the world's surface. It's a large number that's almost unfathomable. That is, until you find yourself drifting along it. Brenda Wagner was excited to take on a simple job, sailing a yacht down the United States coastline, when she found out just how immense the oceanic world is.
It was a simple job. Serve as crew aboard a 58-foot yacht scheduled to sail from the Hamptons in New York to a port in South Carolina. Brenda grew up on yachts and spent much of her teenage years working as part of the crew. So with 4 other experienced sailors, transporting the 58-footer would be a breeze. Along with Tom Hendrickson, Lacey Vaughn, Jeffrey Hasen, and Lena Taggerton, Brenda set sail down the eastern coast. The crew bonded well over the first leg of the lengthy journey, stopping briefly in Little Creek, Virginia, before continuing on to finish the trek to Port of Charleston, South Carolina. The further south they sailed, closer to the Gulf Stream of North Carolina, the seas started to show signs of nearby inclement weather, and before the crew of 5 could decide how to handle the unexpected swell, 45-foot waves came crashing down on them. Unable to withstand the force, the yacht floundered and was slowly lost to the rough seas, leaving Brenda and the yacht's crew stranded on an 11-foot inflatable raft. With Lena suffering from a deep gash sustained during the sinking, Brenda, Tom, Lacey, and Jeffrey struggled to remain calm, their thoughts bouncing between survival and hopelessness. The first day passed, then the second, and the lack of supplies proved to be their undoing. Their painful thirst only had one viable remedy, and so Lacey and Jeffrey turned to the salty ocean water for relief. It wasn't long before dehydration led to delirium, the seawater only worsening their thirst. Brenda hoped to reason with the two when they started talking about leaving their floating sanctuary, but it was no use. It didn't take long for predators of the deep to be alerted to their prey, and though they and the raft drifted apart, their screams could still be clearly heard in the still night air. A lack of medical provisions left Lena with a fatal infection that coursed through her body slowly and painfully. Helpless, Brenda and a weakened Tom did what they could to comfort her, but there was little relief to be found as the infection took its toll, killing the 3rd crew member. By the 5th day, after 2 crew members had been eaten alive by sharks and another killed by spreading infection, giving up would have been so much easier for the remaining 2. And though it was a thought that resounded within their minds, the decision was ultimately left to fate. A miraculous rescue happened upon them, a British cargo ship that pulled them from what could have been their watery grave and returned them to the United States, ending their 5-day nightmare.
This all sounds plausible, but what about the fate of Jeffrey and Lacey? Were they eaten alive by sharks without provocation? Or maybe they sustained injuries and Brenda's account left that crucial detail out. Share your thoughts in the comments. But before we go to the reveal, we have a question for you. Have you ever been so terrified that you completely lost yourself? Mark Wright experienced the power of fear firsthand. And the results? Well, we'll just have to see.
Mark was never fond of water, a fear that started when a strong current pulled him under, nearly drowning him. The memory would hit him randomly and cause his heart to race, but it was at its worst near large bodies of water. His fear only complicated matters when he fell in love 16 years later. Time with Teresa was uncomplicated and filled with laughter and dreams of the future. But Mark always found there to be one divide that, while not detrimental to their relationship, kept him from enjoying something Teresa loved. She was always fond of the sea and, 2 years before meeting Mark, had purchased a powerboat to escape the world in. Summers in Long Beach once meant enjoying the open ocean and the salty air. But with Mark's persistence to remain on land, guilt kept her grounded. 2 summers together passed before Mark mustered the willpower to not let his fear control him. Though he dreaded what the experience would do to his anxiety, he found himself enjoying the feeling of freedom as he let go of his childhood shackles. As California faded into the distance, Teresa stopped the boat to enjoy the solitude and quiet with her love. The hours passed, and the sun started to creep towards the horizon, forcing the two to return to the docks. But as Teresa tried to turn the engine over, she was met with an uneasy silence. Panic quickly set in for Mark as each attempt failed to bring the engine to life. Teresa kept calm and called in a mayday to the mainland, but she found Mark inconsolable. As the minutes passed, his condition worsened, his pulse raced, his breathing became harder and faster, and his mind fogged. Teresa's comforting words were drowned out by the thumping of his heart, and she didn't realize how lost he was until she tried to hug him to her and hide his eyes from seeing the empty horizon, hoping it would soothe him. He felt trapped in his girlfriend's arms and fought to break free, and it was then that, beneath the pounding in his ears, he heard Teresa yelp before water splashed against his face. When he opened his eyes, he was completely alone, the boat rocking gently as small ripples rolled underneath. Teresa was gone, the only sign of her being the small spot of blood on Mark's knuckle. Deep beneath the panic that near completely clouded his mind, he wanted to dive in and find her, but his muscles and fear refused to let him. When he was finally found drifting aimlessly after the morning sunrise, he said nothing and was visibly shaken. After a few days in the hospital, Mark found his voice and recovered enough to confess to Teresa's murder.
Overtaken by fear and panic, can we lose ourselves so much that we hurt the ones we love? Shouldn't the fear of losing Teresa have trumped Mark's own paranoias about drowning? Anxiety can be a powerful thing, but so too is love. So, are we throwing you for a loop? Or is this rooted in reality? Give it your best guess in the comments. and see how strong your intuition is. But before we find out, we have one more high seas excursion to go on, this time across the Pacific. Captain Sine Hamamoto was an experienced Japanese captain who, after years of sailing, was going to get a taste of how unforgiving the ocean really is.
Hamamoto knew the Pacific waters as if they were his home. His first taste of the great salt vastness was at the age of 15, and since then he made it a point to work on whatever ship offered the opportunity. 14 years after his obsession with the high seas formed, he took command of the Yoshino, a small frigate that sailed between outlying provinces and Edo, or present-day Tokyo. Hamamoto took pride in his ship and loved being out at sea. But during a routine trip between Takahagi and Edo, his admiration for the Pacific waters forced him to live out a 15-month nightmare. This particular expedition was met with rough seas as a storm rolled in from the east. Though the Yoshino was a strong ship and had been at sea for years, the experience of her captain and her crew weren't enough to save her from the elements. Heavy winds, towering waves, and blinding rain overtook the vessel, and during the ensuing chaos, her helm and mast were irreparably damaged. The crew survived the storm, but then found themselves drifting east. The loss of the mast and helm left Hamamoto with no control over where the Yoshino went, and so the crew let the waters guide them to safety. The long journey that followed was arduous, and the complete helplessness and lack of control caused a rift among Hamamoto's crew. But the captain resolved to keep his ship together until they reached land, if that ever were to happen. After the first few months drifting across the Pacific, it was clear that the likelihood of any rescue was slim. And it wasn't long until Hamamoto was forced to start dumping his crew at sea as they passed away, either at each other's hands or illness. The ship continued its aimless trek, even as the crew members dwindled and the time at sea broke the year mark. By the 484th day at sea, the Yoshino was a ghost ship, the number of inhabitants reduced to just 3. Hamamoto may not have been the same proud captain he was over a year ago when his ship set sail, but he was alive, and before the day was over, he found that he would stay that way. While sailing in waters just off of California, a British vessel happened upon the aimless Yoshino and helped guide it to a Californian harbor. 15 months, Hamamoto and his 2 remaining crew members were lost at sea, their lives completely changed by the incredible and harrowing journey. The 3 survivors of the Yoshino landed in the United States, but wasted no time to board a British ship sailing to Russia, and then, a year later, taking a Russian vessel to Hokkaido. Over 2 years later, Hamamoto wasn't met with open arms and was instead forced to undergo a lengthy investigation before being granted entry back to his hometown, where he pieced his life back together.
Is it physically possible for anyone to survive being lost at sea for over a year? Clearly, provisions on the Yoshino would have run out not long after being knocked off course. As a man of the sea, though, maybe Hamamoto had the skills necessary to live through such an ordeal. What do you think? Let us know in the comments section right now.
Are you ready to find out if you can decipher between fact or fiction? Let's look back at tonight's 3 stories and find out which were born from reality and which were fabrications of the imagination.
Do you remember the harrowing tale of Brenda, who was rescued at sea afloat in an 11-foot raft? Do you think this story was based on true events? You'd be absolutely right. The story is that of Deborah Scaling Kiley and Brad Kavanaugh, who survived the sinking of a yacht off the coast of North Carolina in 1982. Mark Adams and John Lippeth abandoned the raft and really were eaten by sharks, while Meg Mooney died from an infection. How about the tragic attempt at growth in Mark and Teresa's story? Was Mark faced with the murder of his beloved? If you believe this was true, well, you'd be absolutely wrong. Mark and Teresa don't exist, and their horrific story was a creation of our own twisted minds. As for that third story about the crew of the Yoshino, clearly nobody could survive at sea for 15 months, so this was obviously another falsity conjured up by our writers, right? Sorry, but this was pulled right from the history books. The tale is that of Oguri Tsukichi, captain of the Tukojumaru. Tsukichi and his two shipmates were the first Japanese nationals to enter the United States.
How well did you do in tonight's video? Did you look past the deception of our world and define the off-blurred line that struggles to separate lies from the truth? Let us know in the comment section below. And should you find the urge to test your perceptions again, be sure to subscribe and join us next time when we ask you to decide what's fact or fiction.